Hearing no opposition, I would like to invite Mike to the stage. Thank you.
I appreciate that. I thought it would be bad form if I were to offer opposition to that idea myself. I want to say hello to everyone that I didn't say hello to last night, all you rational people who I'm meeting for the first time. I've also noticed, and I don't mean this to sound in any way pejorative, I noticed that several of the people that I partied with last night when I got here really late from the airport have reintroduced themselves to me. So, which I think is marvelous. Nice to meet you all over again. But, you know, having got off the airplane sober, I do remember. So it's really nice to be with you. Look, our government is not going in the right direction. There's a couple of things that I want to talk to you about today. By the way, of all the things that I'm going to say, the following is the least important and the most obvious. I am not the charm and good looks candidate for your presidential nomination. If there's anything that I say today that makes you happy and comfortable, we are miscommunicating, okay? You had your fun last night. You're going to have a great day today. I am not here to contribute toward your feeling of goodwill and health and faith in your government. Look, it turns out to be true that your government took money from you and your neighbors forcibly, pooled it with a bunch of other money from nations abroad, formed an alliance that absolutely no one knew about in the United States, or for that matter anywhere else, with a foreign nation, sent both material, explosives, and, by the way, American troops, to the Baltic Sea and blew up a pipeline at the bottom. Pipeline that belonged to an international consortium, causing it losses of billions of dollars, causing the German people an annual loss in the tens of billions in terms of increased energy costs. Obviously cost billions of dollars to the Russian people initially, and then somewhat ironically, if you listen to what the White House says its objectives are, increased the flow of petrodollars to the Russian government. This would normally be considered an act of war against the German people. This is obviously a horrific turn of events that we're just learning about now. As bad as all of that is, I would argue that none of that is the worst part of that story, and I'd ask you to put a pin in that just for a moment. It also turns out to be true, in a completely unrelated story, that money was taken from you and your neighbors forcibly. It was pooled with other money. It was pooled from other money from other nations that was completely undisclosed. And it was used to fund research in China on the development of new viral agents. That this was, in the words of Anthony Fauci, not gain-of-function research, but was adjacent to it, apparently. And because it was funding the same lab and money being fungible, it certainly made more possible and accelerated the development of gain-of-function research at a laboratory that was not up to international standards, and from which the COVID virus was accidentally, please God, let's hope it's accidental, was accidentally leaked. It killed a couple of million Americans, many millions of individuals around the world. All of this, the White House also knew about and decided that you didn't need to know. As bad as all of that is, and it's horrible, put a pin in that, because I would also argue that none of what I said about that story is the worst part. These stories seemingly have absolutely nothing to do with each other. And I want to argue today that what's really important about these stories is that they have everything to do with each other. That yours is a government that operates in the shadows. That yours is a government that operates in order to pursue interests, not of you, not of your neighbors, but the interests of the politicians that run that government. That it's a government that brings to itself power at your expense, and the expense of fellow citizens around the world. If there's any good news to this at all, there's not. There's no good news to this at all. If there's a silver lining, it is that increasingly, I believe, and maybe I'm just naive, I believe increasingly the American public is waking up to this. the activities of our federal government are not that different than they were 40 years ago. Our economy looks a lot like it did 40 years ago. If there's a difference, we trust less the democratic institutions that have been set up to take advantage of us. In the 70s and 80s, I noticed that most of the crowd here doesn't remember the 70s and the 80s, so look to someone with gray hair at your table and they can explain it to you. A lot of the same phenomena were going on, but we had a little bit more faith and trust in our politicians and our leaders and the way that our government operated. Shame on us. This creates for us in 2024 as a Libertarian Party an opportunity. People are increasingly aware not only of growing authoritarianism caused by the duopoly just beating the snot out of each other for no other reason than to keep each other out of power, but also an increasing awareness that public policy is at the root of many of our most important problems. There's an awareness that inflation doesn't just grow on a tree, that it comes from bad monetary policy, that the reason we have so much debt is because we have buffoons running Congress and the White House. That your loss of civil liberties is accelerating. People are beginning to recognize this. Not everybody, maybe not even most people, but certainly there is a difference between the way the world is seen now and seen when I was growing up as a kid. This is an opportunity for us in 2024 because all of this plays directly into our wheelhouse. As you might imagine, I spent a lot of time talking about the opportunity in 2024, and I don't want to talk about that today either. What I want to talk to you about today is that 2024 is not merely an opportunity. This is an obligation for us. We are the philosophical descendants of the people that founded this nation and did so for only one damn good reason, that's to protect our individual liberties.
Hear, hear.
Nobody should be under any illusion that some Republican is going to stand up for your individual rights. No one should believe that Democrat is going to stand up for what? Fill in the blank. Your Second Amendment, your First Amendment, your Fourth, anything of use. Your fiscal soundness in your government. Is anyone going to stand up for the simple dignity of being able to raise your children the way that you want to? No. Do you expect a Republican or a Democrat to stand up for the simple dignity of being represented by a federal government that hires a military that acts on your principles, the basic principles of non-aggression, of your right, and by the way, the right of other people around the world to pursue peace and prosperity? We should think of these as simple dignities that we could never lose, and yet here we are fighting to get them back. We're lucky to have as many people as we do in this room. It's a terrific group. We have, what, 50 people in the room? That's fantastic. 50 other groups just like it around the United States. That's not a large number of people. And nobody outside of those rooms is going to do a damn thing. This is up to us. This is not merely an opportunity in 2024. This is our obligation. Now, I believe, and this is the reason that I am participating in the process of seeking the nomination for president to represent the Libertarian Party, I believe that the way that we pursue this matters. That we need to lead with public policy, and we need to do so hard and loud and clearly. We have failed in the past to brand our party. I've run for Congress in the past. I know many of you have run for office, helped others run for office, and one of the first things you learn is that the value of the Libertarian Party brand is approximately zero. In some places, it's not even positive, it's negative. You spend half of your time teaching people what libertarianism is. You spend a portion of your time teaching people how to spell it. As a national candidate, it's our responsibility to build that brand and to do so through a principled campaign that will make our party memorable and, most importantly, distinguishable from the Republican and Democratic parties. Our job is not to seek common ground with Republican and Democratic politicians. Our job is to seek common ground with their voters. Most Americans have a libertarian leaning. We just need to wake them up to that fact. We need to allow them to come to us, to find us. But you can't find us because we're busy with messaging that makes it sound like we're hiding behind Republicans and Democrats. As much as I like Gary Johnson, and I do, he seems like a nice guy, and he seems like a smart enough fellow, he's had a background in public policy and public service, what's there not to love? So don't take this personally, wherever you are, Gary. But if you're running a campaign that says, I'm fiscally conservative like a Republican, and I'm socially liberal like a Democrat, you're not actually campaigning. You're defining yourself in terms of the other parties. And by the way, it's not even true. You're lying to those people. We are not fiscally conservative like Republicans, who, let's be honest, are not fiscally conservative. Would a Republican tell you that taking money from people forcibly for no other reason than to project military hegemony around the world is evil? No, they would not tell you that. Nor are we socially liberal like Democrats. Do we run around canceling each other and forcing each other to think the same way? That would be weird. I was raised by a Lutheran and a Calvinist. I'm fairly certain nobody is interested, nobody in this room should be interested in hearing how my family thinks you should live your life. But a Democrat would be all about it. That's weird to us. It should be weird to everybody. It should be weird to the citizens of the United States. And I believe that if we give them an opportunity to recognize it as such, they would agree with us. I believe that our time has come, but more importantly, it's about to go. Our government is not going in the right direction. We must get in the game. Personally, I'm running a campaign that I call the Gold New Deal because I believe that we need a new relationship between us and our government. Poking fun a little bit at the original New Deal, obviously poking fun at the Green New Deal. The most important part about it is not its cutesy name, but it's a package of transformational ideas that we back up with credibility because of my background in public service and public policy. We believe that that's the right way to lean into this campaign. We're already building a professional campaign staff, for example. But most importantly, we cannot be persuaded to back down from our principles. Remember that we're not searching for 100% of the voters out there. We're not searching for 50% the way a Republican or a Democrat would. In a three-party race, 38% wins. Our goal should be to get to 15% and hope to get into the debates because on a debate stage, we fare well against a Republican and a Democrat. We have principles as weapons that those other teams don't. Of course we fare well. And if we don't, we're in bigger trouble than we can even comprehend. So it's time for each and every one of us to pick up a shovel. This is not merely our opportunity. This is our call of duty. Thank you. Thank you very much. Weird questions only.
Weird?
Weird question. We
Well,
don't
this
have
is
a lot
probably
of
a question
time.
you have not received. So would that qualify?
Oh, sure.
I thank you very much. I like your platform, and you mentioned
you.
brand, where we need to brand ourselves.
Sure.
You probably know Paul Jacob in the back of the room if he's here.
Yep.
He's speaking on INR. What is your opinion for branding ourselves for direct democracy at the federal level?
Well, first of all, just being the team that's out there asking for it is a good look. In other words, there's some things that we can just do administratively that will contribute to our brand. In that way, I believe that ranked choice is a good look for us as a party.
Well, it's in our bylaws, but I don't hear any national candidates speaking about it. And 26 states have it, and Alabama is one that does not.
Right.
So what I'm
Well,
asking for...
we should be out there talking about it
Thank
because
you.
it does make a contribution to our brand as being pro-democracy, right? That's very, very important. If we want to be the party of transformational ideas, we also need to be the party that sets in motion the vehicles by which to make those transformations. I believe that those go hand in hand. In that sense, we have to be able to run a transformational candidate, someone who's willing to, as they used to say in the 15th century, take the slings and arrows. Not someone who is interested in reaching every single voter and compromising in a way to do that. All of these parts have to go together, if that makes sense.
Yes, yes.
One more weird question, but it has to be weird.
I've got a weird one. Do you have suggestions and guidance that you can bring towards candidates that are dealing,
Yeah.
with that?
Yeah,
That you can share? I
Absolutely.
think that's a huge thing that discourages folks from stepping up and taking that risk of going out for public office.
I understand.
You don't want to peacock yourself and become a target for law enforcement to start harassing you.
No, I do get that, because police unions can be very powerful political forces. Look, I spend a lot of time talking about criminal justice reform, but not merely ending the war on drugs, which I think is horrifically important, but I spend a lot of time talking about the fact that we need to change police culture and change the way we manage police. And I do that as a recently retired police officer because I remain pro-cop. You can be pro-cop and pro-reform. Indeed, you need to point out that a democratic response of defund the police is completely unhelpful. Because the solution is not fewer cops, it's fewer bad cops, sure. But we need to change the way that we manage police. And the Republican knee-jerk reaction of just, support the blue no matter what, in every circumstance, every guy, every gal, I mean, it's moronic and it's not helpful. Reform is hard work. And you need to push for that. And that reform needs to look like, in the big picture, what that reform needs to look like, and I think a lot of people would be able to relate to this. I believe most people are receptive to the idea that we need to make police management look more like other businesses. We need market forces to come into the business of police management in such a way that, in the long run, good cops get paid more, mediocre cops get paid less, bad cops get fired.
Prosecuted.
And
prosecuted.
Oh, and absolutely. And that's the other piece, qualified immunity. By the way, qualified immunity itself, qualified immunity per se, doesn't affect that many cases, and it only affects civil cases. But there's two things about qualified immunity that really matter more than just the number of cases that it affects directly. One is that it sets a tone for court deference to police officers. We have this whole culture in the criminal justice system that defers to police too much, I would argue. In some places, not very much. In some places, tremendous amount, right? To your point, that there are plenty of places that don't want to prosecute police officers. And that's largely a political phenomenon, right? Because the community's pro-cop, terrific. What the community doesn't realize is that's part and parcel of making your police department better is weeding out bad officers. So qualified immunity has to come down just for the signal that it sends to the system for court deference. The other important piece about getting rid of qualified immunity is that police officers think it's important. Even when I was working, I didn't retire until 18 months ago. I was on the road for 11 and a half years. Yeah, which is weird. I had gray hair even on my way in. I worked from age 49 to 60. Even during that time, we thought that qualified immunity affected many, many cases, and it doesn't. But it's the attitude that matters, right? So the way this would work is you would get rid of qualified immunity, which has to start at the national level, of course, but it seeps down. You could probably do it at the state level, and we need to talk about getting out of federal supremacy and all of that, but however you do it, you got to get rid of qualified immunity. It's got to seep down. It has to be replaced by a mandate for officers, and this can be handled at the community level, should be at the state level, but could be at the community level. Officers need to be required to carry private sector liability insurance. They need to be bonded by somebody from outside of the government. And the reason this is so important is because an officer needs to feel the pinch of changes in premium rates. It has to be more like a surgeon. And I don't mean a rocket surgeon. I mean a doctor surgeon, right? When a doctor makes a mistake, we don't say, well, she didn't mean it. So, have a nice day. No, you need, indeed, is there anything more American than being able to seek redress in court? I mean, it's important, right? We're not saying cops are bad by saying that. We're saying they're like anybody else. You shouldn't have, we don't give everyone else immunity. I mean, big pharma, but that's another problem. We shouldn't be giving anyone else immunity, right? We shouldn't be giving public officials immunity. I understand that if you're in a high liability industry, like doctors and cops, and plenty of other people, by the way, then you're gonna need insurance to back that up. I mean, nobody thinks it's a good idea to risk losing your house because you made a mistake at work on Tuesday, right? So you're gonna have to carry liability insurance, but you need to be responsible for the changes in the premium